art inflects upon reality or our understanding of reality. An artwork is both an image and an object in the world, whether it's an image into a world or how it gets embedded in our world. And the play of that is interesting to me. Mummifying something and then making an object around it that is the image of the thing. The image continues into the object in a way that sculpture of the past could never say that. If you cut into a bronze from the Renaissance, it's hollow, it's skin deep essentially.
Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host Javier Proenza, and today my guest is Cameron Cummings. We're here at Permanent Storage, which is an artist-run space that you're the director of, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I started it in December 2017.
Oh, so it's been around for a minute.
Yeah.
So what's the interest in wax as a medium? I mean, because as a Catholic, it has connotations for me. But you're from Houston. I don't know. Like, are you Protestant upbringing?
Okay.
Right.
I did go to a Christian school, but it was like a Baptist school. But
you guys don't fuck with candles the same way.
No.
That's more of our seance-y ritual-y shit.
Yeah, there's more everything in Catholicism, but there are still some candles involved even in Protestant sects.
I mean, you guys also do the transubstantiation, right? Like that's that's the Eucharist.
I don't know. I actually did go to a service last Christmas because my mom especially is still religious, so she kind of demands that of me. So, and it's basically once a year that I go now, I guess, if I see them at Christmas. And I know, so the candle, at least, and the church they go to is not like Baptist. I don't know what ordination it is, but there is a candle involved. It's not during communion, though. I think it's just when a specific hymn is sung or something.
Okay.
I can't exactly remember, but there's always the candle that gets brought out.
And humans are holding the candle?
Yeah, we each got our candle.
Yeah. I've never that just seems so dangerous.
And you get the hot wax to drip on your hand, and you're like,
Wow. That it's all these little subtle differences between our very similar religions. We had the same main dude.
Yeah. Pretty big differences though when you
Well, you guys don't have the Holy Spirit. I mean, we don't have to talk about your religious upbringing.
We have the Holy Spirit.
You do? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So then
we got the Trinity.
You guys have the Trinity? So then what is it that you guys don't have?
It's mostly
the pedophilia, obviously.
it's mostly rites and rituals that are extinguished with a lot of Protestant versions of Christianity. Like, we do the communion. But a lot of the like hierarchy and the pomp and circumstance that goes with Catholicism is washed away.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's sort of what Puritanism was about, was getting rid of they saw as the obstruction between you and God. It was all this stuff. I would actually say it's actually the opposite. That stuff is actually kind of what more interesting and brings you closer when you get rid of all that, and when you don't have stained glass, when you just have plain glass and none of that fun stuff. It gets very dry pretty quick.
Yeah.
And
then it's just you and the Lord.
That's what they wanted, I guess. I don't know. At one time, that seemed the right way to go. But
that cat is the most acrobatic. There's a cat on top of a partition wall.
Yeah.
And that is a very tall wall. So that cat, I don't know how it got up there.
Well, there's a loft in there, and she hops.
I was like,
hopefully,
claw marks I was picturing on the other side of this wall.
Hopefully she shuts up after a while. She's a very nice kitty.
No, she's not louder than the fan, so she'll probably be cut out with when I put the gate on everything.
Be quiet, kitty.
Nah, she's cool. We have cats. I'm literally editing an episode this morning on the way over here, and there's a cat in it. So it's cat and art. They kind of go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. Well, so then I'm sorry, went off on a tangent, and I'm into it. We can always
Religious
talk about religion. Is always an interesting topic to me because it's like about trauma.
Yeah, for sure, and it does actually tie into the work I make and how I think about making my work. A lot of it is based on that kind of spiritual void that that I think is pretty pervasive in a lot of society now. Like the one that's off camera here, that's just called Bone, and that was kind of basically like my version of a reliquary.
Okay.
Yeah.
What? So how do you guys handle reliquaries?
Oh, they're not.
You don't have relics. You don't have
Nah.
like pieces of human meat
No,
that pilgrims come and worship.
no, I mean, yeah, no.
No,
Not that I know of. Maybe,
You're
maybe.
right. Catholicism does it a little bit more fun.
Yeah, right?
I mean, I think that it's almost impossible to replicate though, because like who's going to be, after the merchant and the city state became peers, like who's going to have that kind of power? Like what church? No church is ever going to be that powerful again, unless like we have an AI god soon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's coming around the corner. Yeah.
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 Okay, so then, like, what are the main themes that like the religious stuff that you're into that shows up in the work? Or I mean, because you said it's kind of there, or you don't have to.
It is there. It's
or
just
what is the work about specifically?
Well,
conceptually.
What I think the work is about is sort of twofold. Actually, I do think that the religious stuff, or the quasi-religious, or the fragments of spiritual things are kind of actually the more superficial thing that I'm dealing with. Like this one here that's on camera, it's called Deposition, and that's an interesting word because it can mean many things, but in Catholic imagery, it's specifically Christ coming off the cross. And
I'd never heard that term.
Yeah,
maybe I only heard it in Latin.
Maybe. And then this is called Icarus Fragment. So playing, with mythological devices or illusions here and there. That one over there off camera is more of an Egyptian motif. Mm-hmm. I saw this Fayum portrait in the Met a few years ago, and it was mounted on this red kind of thing. And I thought it was so cool that I wanted it. So I kind of made my own version of it. Yeah. And obviously that has to do with death as well. All these things basically have to do with death, right?
The one with Icarus?
Right. That dying.
Like falling from the sky?
Yeah.
And then Jesus coming off of the cross.
Yeah, a lot of death, yeah. But it's heavily abstracted. A lot of people see this and they see a whale, which I get it. And I actually think that's fine because, there's the idea that, Icarus fell into the sea. I thought, yeah, fine.
Not just that. I mean, whales are mythical.
Sure.
Like, there's like
Jonah
and the whale.
Yeah. It all makes sense, right? But that's kind of the more of the surface, even though it's very abstracted. Mm-hmm. And to me, in my thinking, what I'm really interested in is, and I feel like I don't do it as well as some people, some artists I really like have done it, or I do it differently, or I would like to start making work more in this mode, which is the kind of degree that an artwork is both an image and an object in the world, the way the play of reality, basically, whether it's an image into a world or how it gets embedded in our world. And the play of that is interesting to me. There's a few artists who I really admire, sculptors like Charles Ray, who I think are kind of at the cutting edge of that, of this play of image and objecthood. And it's just something I'm interested in. And that's why Egyptian mythology really interests me, mainly the act of mummification, this thing of and then mummifying something and then making an object around it that is the image of the thing, or an idealized image, or an archetypal image of the thing. That's an interesting play of reality, where the image inside that the image continues into the object in a way that sculpture of the past could never say that. If you cut into a bronze from the Renaissance, it's hollow, it's skin deep essentially. And if you chip a marble, similar thing, it might be solid, but it's still the surface. And the way that a sculpture can continue and the way that it can continue in time and what we do to it. Like if an object gets damaged, does the image continue or is it transformed? That's what I'm interested in. That's why there's the idea that white marble sculpture that's in a ruined state that came into vogue during the Renaissance, that's still very popular, that's only visible under a certain kind of aesthetic criteria is interesting. Whereas if we saw those marbles in their original painting, which is fairly garish and kind of kitschy, really, even, would we be able to see it and recognize it as art? Or would it be simply discarded as a kitsch object? Which is still art, but a very kind of reductive form of art.
I get what you're saying. I think to me, it's more archival feeling, like the same way that a black and white photograph versus a color photograph feels more historical, right?
A little bit. It's what I was trying to get at was it's sort of a reversal of that idea of the ancient marble, where if you make something today in a
authentic to the original,
the way that it kind of anticipates its own ruination and continues, that ruination doesn't transform it, that it actually it remains the same. It remains kind of embedded in the world.
So the fact that it was color still exists within it, that it was painted.
Essentially, yeah. And I guess a good example of this, I guess, would be, I already brought him up, Charles Ray, where certain sculptures he's done, maybe not everything, but specifically like the tractor, if you've ever seen that one. I think it's in the Mocha collection. What's really interesting about that sculpture is that I believe he disassembled that tractor and then modeled each component and reassembled it. Maybe not each one, but if you look at it very closely, you'll notice that a lot of the bolts are not sculpted. They're real. So they're performing a real task of bolting together two pieces of metal. But it's sculpted. Cast. Yeah. Well, that's actually one of those really nerdy questions that I would love to ask Charles Ray. Is like, did you just go to Home Depot and get because that sculpture's aluminum, and I'm wondering if those are steel or whether he like got aluminum. I'm pretty sure that sculpture's aluminum. These are like very nerdy sculptural questions, but they're things that really excite me about certain sculpture. And basically, the point I was trying to make with that is that if something were to happen, that if like you were to shoot it up with a machine gun or something, essentially because the sculpture continues beyond its surface planes that's visible, it continues. Like if you destroy it more, the image endures because
no, I'm trying to follow. I'm not trying to be difficult and not get it on purpose. I'm not spitefully not understanding.
I'm not explaining it well enough, or what I'm thinking. No,
I think I'm getting it. I follow you to the certain extent. Where I think the thing that is escaping me is the moment that is escaping me is the image continues once it's destroyed. So if you tie back, if I'm tying it back into what we're talking about with the sculpture, right? Like with the painted sculpture. Uh-huh. So in the context, I think the image continues is the language that I'm not up to speed on. So if you can maybe,
well, okay, I'll do the contrary, the opposite example. Basically, if you shoot up or cut into an ancient bronze, the image necessarily doesn't continue. It's disrupted. And it transforms. It becomes something else. Maybe it's still aesthetic to us. Maybe it's even more interesting, but it's not the original. It's not what was intended.
So then, now going to the example of the thing that gets destroyed, why does that have the difference?
Mainly because a lot of the art that the artists who are kind of what I think, again, for lack of a better way of saying, kind of on the cutting edge of this, they kind of a lot of the imagery itself is already pre-destroyed. Mm-hmm. Like another example, Charles Ray, is I believe it's called Unpainted Sculpture, and it's a sculpture of a wrecked car, a car that has been pretty much destroyed. And with that, I do know that for that one, he did disassemble the car, and each element he sculpted.
because he sculpted the insides of
it.
Because there's craftsmanship within it. Okay.
So that if you take a laser or whatever and cut it in half,
what's inside.
but what's inside is still the same image. Uh-huh. It's contradictory because we think image as planar
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is that sculptural image in this way continues with despite its ruination, because it already anticipates it, and it anticipates it doubly, really, because the initial image itself is already of a wrecked car or a ruined tractor. So I've always loved specifically those works by Charles Ray, because they seem so aware of this kind of thing that really excites me. There are other artists who do it very differently, and that like Tom Sachs, I think, is a good example of a sculptor who does this, but in a very different way. A different example, but one that's probably fairly easy. It would be hard to parse Tom Sachs in this way effectively, at least right now. But Jeff Koons specifically, like when he deals with blown up objects or objects that contain air, like the balloon dog. I know no one wants to talk about that, I guess, but
I have no beef with Jeff
okay,
Koons.
good.
I'm relieved that you brought him up, because I know that there's like such snootiness towards him, and I'm like,
I like some things he's done. Like I do like the basketballs in the tanks. I think those are actually really cool. And even though the balloon stuff, the balloon motif might be overexposed, what is still intriguing about that, and Charles Ray himself has even talked about this in a positive light, is that because the image itself is one where the object contains air, so he's kind of doing the same thing with those things, but in a pretty clever way, and in a way that's that harkens back sort of to the empty bronzes of antiquity and the Renaissance. Is that if you cut into Balloon Dog, it is hollow. Yeah. But the image does continue, because the balloon dog necessarily is hollow. It necessarily contains air, so that hollowness is actually part of the nature of the image.
Are you saying that the one that broke recently is that still the image?
I wasn't aware of that, but
oh, you didn't hear? I thought literally this is why you were using this example.
No.
Okay, so apparently someone knocked one over, and it's in pieces. Oh, this is like you should look that up, because it's freaking relevant to exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, I did. A small version, ceramic at a fair. Yeah. Essentially. Essentially, yes. Obviously, it might take some hurdles to like get there in your mind, and it's mostly would I say that pile of debris is like a work of art, or like that it's better than the original, or not, something like that? Probably not. I think what I'm saying is that this is kind of the more philosophical component, for lack of a better word, of these works that is exciting. That it's bounded to their aesthetic potential, but it is a little bit outside the aesthetic, in that it kind of has a what I think is a fairly intellectual, or necessarily, a fairly it has to do with the way art inflects upon reality, or our understanding of reality. So that, I think, is
No, I'm following
that's what
you.
I'm trying to say.
So then, like, if we cut that reliquary, what's inside of it?
there's actually stuff inside it.
I didn't want to imply that it was like a dead baby, but
no, there is actually. It's this weird amorphous kind of shape. And to me, when I was making it, there's things inside of it, and I don't really want to go into what's inside of it. It's kind of a little personal secret. I mean, it's not personal, but it's kind of like it's.
Now I want to rip it open.
Yeah, If it lasts any time at all, and if that's it's kind of, again, it's it is a more intellectual aspect of it, or a fun thing to just think about.
Yeah, it's a thought exercise. It's the kind of philosophical stuff that maybe isn't pragmatic, like it's not going to help you feed your family, but it's a nice exercise.
Yeah, none of this is going to help you feed your family, but
well, most art isn't.
Yeah. So the object actually it originated with two components that were mended together and they're actually the same image, the same object, just one slightly smaller than the other. And then on that, I just piled stuff, layered it, and then the kind of exterior is basically encaustic.
Mm-hmm.
And then the box itself is pure resin, which is kind of fun because it's clear resin, but it's built up in these layers, so it has this kind of moody atmosphere to it. And then let's see, that's kind of the best example of actually something that
You could
in my own work that it's kind of following in this path, albeit not in as precise a way. And I think the precision of those images by Koons and Ray is what excites me, because they're very, to use like a Richard Serra term, they're like prime objects or dominant objects, I think, in terms of this mode of sculpture. Yeah. And I for myself, the path that I've thought that I want to try to continue this trajectory would be into kind of mummification aspects, which I've only done very little of. But I want to do more. It's just
would you consider the reliquary something in that vein, or is that
not
direct?
I mean literal mummification. And again, it has to do with like
like biological matter.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
so what are you thinking of? Like, I'm thinking of who's the artist that did the sweaters for the birds? The dead birds? Oh man,
sweaters for the dead birds.
So okay, I forget what her name is, but so she basically, I don't know what it happened. Like, it affected me hearing this story so much that I kept a dead bird that I found that was like almost pristine, but I could smell it, and I was like, "Oh, that's what death smells like."
Yeah,
It like lasted 2 days before that smell came up. But so I think what happened is that she found like a taxidermy bird or something like that, or maybe she found an actual dead bird. But anyway, the however the process went, in the end, she had like a body of work that was just a bunch of dead birds that were wearing sweaters. I forgot what you said.
Sounds cool.
Mummification.
Yeah.
But so like I think she did taxidermy stuff. But like, are you like gonna be going hunting and then mummifying?
No,
like,
no. It's mostly
gross, like you buying beef from the store.
Yeah. No. There are different like things like I plan on doing or I've had like dabbled in the past. It takes a while for these things to like ferment in the mind and then finally, spill out in the world. But I actually do have a couple things that are like buried in salt, beginning of this process. But they're honestly usually things I find.
So my true crime side is
really
really starting to have problems with you.
I've done like some very small things. Like I found some like squished frogs, that like in Houston where I grew up, I found these things years ago, just walking the streets. And then the summer, I think like this time of year, a little earlier, like all these frogs will come out and then cars will run them over. And then the heat comes. So they're actually very quickly, not mummified, but they're sort of preserved in that all their innards are dispersed and they're desiccated. So there's not really a lot of bacteria buildup. They're very dry. So they just become these little patties. I haven't done anything with them yet. I wish I had more, but so I could do some. But I actually like a few years ago, I found a squished bird in Home Depot in the Home Depot parking lot. I was just walking and I looked down and it unfortunately was like a little baby, but it was completely, I guess it was springtime, and one fell out and got squished, but it was perfectly preserved and it was an amazing image. And I preserved that. I encased it in rubber basically. And I made it work with that. So that's quasi mummified. But
well, if you put like something biological inside rubber, does it keep, or did it work because it was already?
Yeah, it was already quite
self-preserving.
The main components towards mummification are basically drying out the body with salt. So you dry it out, and then you want to gut it. You definitely want to get the intestines out. So anything that's bacteria. Okay. So if something is squished on the road, and basically all the innards are expelled very quickly, and then it's heated very quickly, it's kind of doing the process very rapidly, or as rapidly as possible, to where there's not a lot of material for bacterial infestation or maggots or whatever.
But the baby bird, Did it also have its like insides?
Yeah, it was
Okay,
totally
all right,
squished. It
all
was
right.
it was
I
like
okay.
it was like that.
Because I've seen them like they look like
I wouldn't want to. I would if something was like just like I don't want to pick up something that's truly nasty.
yeah.
Even that I was like,
Yeah.
and gotta wash my hands. But yeah, so it's mainly honestly like roadkill that I found. And I've done some fish in the past, but I like went to a market and bought the fish and then
Sure you can
gutted them.
eat roadkill, so you can make art out of it. No, like there's places where it's legal to just eat, right?
Well, if you eat roadkill, you definitely want to make sure that roadkill died pretty recently.
Yeah.
Maybe you just saw it got hit or something. Because
maybe I'm thinking the Beverly Hillbillies, and that's not a thing. But I'm pretty sure that like you can. I mean,
yeah, you could.
Legally, no one's gonna be like, go to jail.
No, you might have to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
But yeah. So just again, it has to do with both both aspects of what I was just talking about. Basically, the spiritual aspect of this ancient practice of trying to understand death, and also the way in a sculptural practice, the way to get the image more embedded in the world and to get it closer to the reality of the world. Well, that's not a very good way of saying it. Basically, to try to, I like the phrase "continuing the image." I don't know. To me, that's the most, or at least right now, when I'm thinking, that's a pretty effective way of describing how to how to push the image into the world. Essentially,
No,
I know these are kind of metaphorical ways of describing it, but it's hard not to.
I mean, art is pretty much all metaphor, no?
Right, and that's essentially the play is the degree of literalness and metaphor, and a lot of that has to do with the kind of sensibility that has been inherited from the ready-made and minimalism, the literalizing of the object, and how to get illusion back into play, or how to play. Maybe not how to get it back into play, like it's a bad thing to be like partisan about what side of the artistic aisle you're on in terms of whether you like illusion or literalness. But
what side are you on?
No, I don't want to be that.
Oh, you don't. Okay.
I that's why I say not to get illusion back into play, but just the play of illusion is what interests me, and how to push that play even further. Yeah. Further than further than what I have understood is happening in the works of like Charles Ray, Sachs, Koons, or whoever else.
But I mean, I would definitely say you're like, I talk to contemporary artists, the artists that are now making stuff that identify as modernist. I would say you're probably most overtly not modernist in the way that you're approaching your own practice. If like, I mean, not as a pejorative to either side, I know, but just as an observation. Like, do you feel like? Because I mean, I'm a conceptual artist. I'm doing stuff that is like painting based now, but it's so hard to fucking escape what I am, So So like, someone recently asked me what it's about, and I was like, oh, I actually have an answer, and I thought I didn't.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but then you're like, oh, I've been thinking about it the whole time. Yeah. But it sounds like you're much more deliberate. Like maybe the thinking leads the practice a little bit more, which it can for me. Sometimes.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, because that's something that I was going to go on a tangent on and I didn't. But I'm glad that we kind of naturally arrived there. We're
going to cycle back through everything you've said and find what we missed.
Yeah.
and then when there's like 15 minutes left, I'm going to be like, did I forget to ask you anything?
Right. It's kind of like that. The degree of control you have in the making of your own work is an interesting question. And even though I've thought this stuff through to some extent, I think it's fairly apparent, at least from what's visible, that you might look at this and be like, well, how is this functioning in the way you just described? And it is only in part, I would say. I don't know if I've gotten there fully in my work. I definitely don't think I have. But also, I do think you start in on an object or just on a material, and it starts dictating itself to you. And even though you might have a specific mode or sensibility that you're working in, it can sometimes the image or just the work takes over, and you can get lost. And so it's a constant push-pull that I know every artist feels of knowing what they're about and then their work telling you what it's about.
Yeah.
And how to navigate that is always tricky. Sometimes, I'll stumble on an object I just come across and it immediately evokes an image and I run with it. Other times I'll plan out something for months, even years before I get to it, or just never get to it, So
Or
it's
not yet.
or not yet. Yeah. Again, how these things ultimately manifest is a very mysterious aspect that I have no real idea how that operation occurs.
But then do you do like what kind of not to be like research, right? Like because maybe it's not that deliberate, right? Because I think art research a lot of times isn't. Art research, you're just kind of idly interested in something, and then all of a sudden you see it show up, right? And you're like, oh, that's why I was obsessed with that, and you didn't even really know what was tickling you about it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like materials and whatnot, I definitely understand what you're talking about. Like I've had things that, or sometimes you have a material and then you have an idea and you don't realize that they go together, right? Like you have something that you've stashed away, and you thought it goes into that. Oh, I'm never finishing that. It was just an idle thought that I had, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there it is again, you know, which is a really interesting thing.
Yeah.
I made a deliberate effort to stop being so literal, like in my work, where I was finding myself, and I've said this before, so apologies to people that listen, but just the like I just got tired about how easy it was to explain my work because it was so conceptual in conceit that you didn't even need to experience it and to get it, but then you're missing something by not experiencing and thinking you got it, like it was just very easy. So, I mean, to some extent, I'm happy that stuff is still there, but it's not maybe like that dominant in the work. But like, yeah, it was just like sort of realizing like, like I'm thinking and I'm not realizing that I'm thinking. What about in terms of, going back into the research thing, like what do you consume a lot of mythology? What is your main like, because obviously you know something. Are you going to like museums and or I mean, the Icarus story is maybe like a story that's like a grade school story. So most people probably are familiar with it. Yeah. But I don't think the Egypt stuff that you were addressing was necessarily like, it sounds like you have some depth to the, to your interest in that stuff. Is that the main thing that you're like, what are your interests outside of art making that come into play?
Yeah, well, outside of art, but very contingent on art, the interests that come into play are kind of the things we already talked about, which are the kind of spiritual void that I.
But I'm saying specifically, like what, like, do you read the Odyssey?
Oh,
I mean, not to get like, I mean, that's just an example, but like, what? Okay, you can't make art in a void, right? You like if we locked you in this room, you would only make art about being in this room. Right. Like, and so life experience comes into play, right? That, which is why like we all sucked when we were younger and we look back and we cringe at some of our old work. Right. And you're like, oh my God, I was so unsophisticated. Yeah. So like what is that, what is the experience of life for you? Because I mean, I know very little about you. I know that you do, are you scholarly? Like, I know that your day job is like art handling and stuff like that. Yeah. Do you spend a lot of time reading? Are you playing a lot of like 20 hours of Civ 6 like I do?
No, I'm definitely not a gamer.
I didn't say I was a gamer. I said I played a lot of video games. Okay.
Well, yeah, that shows just how little I know about gaming, of what the rules are for being qualified as a gamer. I
think it's more of a commentary on how old I am and that it wasn't okay when I was a kid to be a gamer, and I am resistant to that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't play music. I don't play video games. I would like to do certain things that I just don't. I mean, I'll be honest, it sounds maybe very boring, but I mainly just think about art and make art and read about art and
so you read, you spend a lot of time reading specifically about art? Like,
yeah, I do.
Like, yeah. What, like,
not
theory?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, A lot of time, I don't know. Depends on what you mean by that. I basically.
I mean, no one's gonna hold you to the counter
Yeah.
to the schedule you keep.
I always try to have a book that I'm digesting. I've read a lot of Dave Hickey recently, and I have another book by him that I want to read.
What does he write about?
Art.
But I mean, like, dude, Clement Greenberg writes about art. I'm sure it's not the same shit.
No. Dave Hickey, I believe. Yeah, he's dead now, but he's kind of a breath of fresh air for me, at least. I've read 2 of his books, and I think I only started reading him probably less than a year ago, and he basically just talks very matter-of-factly about the art world and about art education and the art market and things like that, and also less day-to-day things or real-world things. He talks about, taste as well, but he talks about these things in a way that, one, I think is extremely beautiful writing, but also good prose, but also just a very knowledgeable guy who he's not trying to deceive you, and
there's a lot of that shit in the art world.
Yeah,
and art writing,
and even in art writing, and
Yeah.
so and part of I think his frustration with the art world was the kind of lack of sincerity and blah 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 that was going on in multiple aspects. So it's a good read. I highly recommend them. Yeah.
What is his take on art school? That's a very interesting one for me. Where did you go to school?
NYU.
NYU. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you happy with your education?
Yeah. Mostly happy. In retrospect, during it, I felt like, well, I think I was a jerk, and also
Yeah, I can relate.
and also
Pretentious.
Yeah,
me too.
and also just I think like full of complaint during the program. For what reason, not too sure, but I think a lot of the real education kind of happened after school, looking back on my experience and trying to understand like why my attitude was bad and things like this, and yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't put it all on you because the whole thing is kind of unnatural. I was recently talking to my friend who was saying that a particular, well, whatever, we said it on the episode, that was saying that Skowhegan is not a cult, but it has, like, what that, it's a residency in Maine. So that idea, there's something really strange when you, as an adult, get to not fight in the capitalist system to stay alive. Like whether or not you have money from your parents, or you have loans that you're living off of, like the insane amount of pressure, and then it's almost like you're in summer camp with adults, right?
Yeah.
Like the level of responsibility is gone, and so some really interesting cultural things happen there. And I think that there is an overt cult element to art education.
Oh yeah, for sure. Notoriously certain schools that have this kind of aura, and
We're talking about Kyle Arts, right?
well, not just that, but
Not
there
exclusive.
are other ones. There are East Coast schools also for sure.
Like which ones? Come on, man.
Well, Yale is pretty notorious. But whatever. I mean,
I know 2 dudes that went to Yale. One is super humble, and one is cool, but very driven.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being driven. It's mainly just the kind of. It's the idea that it's a similar thing where quality artifacts are at quality institutions. You go to the Met for quality artifacts. You go to the Guggenheim for quality paintings. And Yale, the branding element of a lot of these universities, these more intense ones like maybe Yale or Cal Arts, there's a kind of presumption of quality if you get in and you graduate. And we all know in art that this idea of quality is maybe not a good word, because I don't think really anyone has a real basis for what means quality. It basically means there's people backing these people, and the problem is that life is, to me at least, life seems kind of long, and an art career, you can be up for 10 years and then down.
Yeah.
So yeah, as far as art's concerned, these things the verdict is never really decided, and until we're all dead. I think it was Francis Bacon who said something like, "You can never really assess the quality of works of art until." I think he said, this is verbatim, I guess, or not exact. He said something like, "You can't tell the quality of an artist until 50 years after their death," or something like that. Basically, that you got to get away from them.
Thank God we don't have to find out.
Yeah. You got to get away from them. You got to get away from people immediately around them, so that the only voice left is the art. Essentially, it's getting away from a lot of these things that obfuscate or hide the just deadpan aesthetic judgment of an artwork. Besides the name or the discourse around it, or the fact that this person went to Yale.
Yeah, and I realized that I made the other one of them seem like really driven and the other one seemed not. And I'm like, they're both driven. It's just
too driven.
No, I think the distinction is that one does public works. And to me, that is like, when you're getting into like public works commissions and stuff like that is a whole different, that's like a new skill set that I didn't learn in school. So to me, like, that is impressive in that sense. Yeah. But they're both like fucking kicking ass. It's not.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah.
I just didn't want to be like, yeah, going to Yale sucks.
No,
yeah. And also, they're both
I'm just jelly.
No, I'm jelly too, and they're both my friends. So I just wanted to clarify that not one is not better than the other. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the education system is always interesting. What does he say about the art world itself? Like, does he get into like the fact that it's that we all have to deal with the fact that we're just at the highest levels, it's just money laundering?
He definitely gets into the bureaucracy. He's very anti-bureaucracy. It's very clear in his writing. And
so, like, what does he consider bureaucracy? Like institutions, gatekeeping and whatnot?
A lot of that, and a lot of just more people in places of power that kind of don't have I think you just have to read him, but he's very anti-bureaucracy. It's the administrative side of the art world that gets in the way, essentially, his thinking of the really experience of art, and also potentially can crush the experience of art, of good art, if the wrong people, if bad actors get into play. And but I mean, bureaucracy by its very nature, I would argue, almost guarantees that.
It's like not having psychopaths in the CIA.
Yeah, it's just the incentive structure that kind of
not having rapists, pedophiles in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Institutions support certain kinds of actions.
Right. Yeah. And but he's one thing that's very exciting about his writing is that he'll often write whole essays about things that are not even about the art world, but are very related, or he'll bring it back. Like he likes to talk about the creation of basketball and the rules of basketball, and how that can even relate to. I'm just picturing
a bunch of really short white guys.
Yeah. But it's very interesting, the writing and the different things he picks up on. So it's pretty exciting because he does get away from the kind of tired language of certain scholars and the kind of looking at art in a vacuum. And it's hard not to do that when you're writing about art, what you're writing about. But he's very good about picking up all these different cultural aspects and relating it back to visual art, basically.
Do you write yourself? Like, is that a practice that you try to...
I try is a good word.
I mean, it's always in the back of my head, but I'm like, where am I going to find the fucking time?
Yeah. I've been trying to write stuff for a few years now, and it's always been very difficult. I've used Instagram a little here and there to try to write little blurbs. I don't think anyone reads them because they look at the image and then they see the text and it's this big and they're like, oh no. But I do it mostly for me as an exercise, just to try to stay within the limits of the Instagram word count to see like what I can say, because my problem, at least as far as writing goes, is one, it's hard. It's really hard to write just beautifully or well at all. I don't think that's a natural ability of mine at all. It's
I can write simply, but not
yeah,
like like not artfully.
yeah. And I would argue that Dave Hickey does both. He's very intellectual, very knowledgeable, and also his writing is just very gorgeous. So they're very nice to read. But also, yeah, I try and fail so far because one, I'm not very good just at the writing itself, but also two, I seem to, it's hard to stay on rails, to be your own coach, so to speak. That's why I talk about the Instagram saying like, you can only have this many characters, where if I have a subject and I start writing about it, it can kind of go off track or become too big. And then I'm thinking like, what am I doing? And I have a few bits of writing that I'm trying to get done. I had one that I was hoping to put out like in February, but other things happened and now it's May. But it had directly to do with like Art Forum's Best of 2022, and now it's May. So I'm like, well, I still want to finish it. Just I want to do that just for myself. Yeah.
You can put it out next year when they do this.
Right. But that's a little bit on the back burner. But I have this other thing that I started to write to do another like little Instagram thing, and it kind of got too big even for that. And this
there's a text limit on Instagram?
Yeah. There.
What is it?
I don't know. Okay. But I know there's some limit.
You might be the only person that came close to knowing.
That's again exactly. No one reads, like I wouldn't read that if I was scrolling.
Well, I mean,
and
that's not fair. I've had a guest on who's a lawyer, who's a criminal defense attorney, and her dad was one of the Yippies. Was one of the I think his name was Skip Williamson. He's like a cartoonist. But anyway, she writes like huge things, and I'm always like, tell me about how fucked up the system is. So if I'm sure there's an audience for it.
Yeah, I do read. I have some accounts I follow that do sort of long-winded things, and every now and then I'll read them. But yeah, maybe one or two people out there have actually read what I've read.
Have you ever tried to do like one of those carousel posts where you just have like text and then text and then text?
Yeah, I don't know. It's mostly, I'll be like, doing that is really just for me, just to see if I can say anything in such a small window. That's kind of what,
Are you on Twitter at all?
No. So I can only do one social media. I'm pretty sure
Jesus Christ. I try to do more than one, and I can only do one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure in a decade I won't have any. I'll be completely over it. But I have another thing that I'm hoping to really finish. It's always very difficult at the end when I feel like everything's kind of summiting in the text, and you're trying to congeal it and get at something. But I'm very close to finishing one thing, and it's much shorter. It's like under 2,000 words, but it's about Anselm Kiefer and the Exodus show that he just had.
That shit was crazy.
Yeah, and I loved it, and I wrote a little Instagram blurb about how much I basically liked it. But then this text is mostly me kind of questioning certain things.
Like what?
Well,
did it need to be that big?
No, it definitely did. Yeah. No,
Shit.
That's the thing.
Scale on that is so huge, dude.
I've started the text by just saying like I like the work, but and that's something I can't escape. And the whole basis of the text is basically the nature of the aesthetic in Kiefer's work, and how like I can't help but like that work. When I see it, it's instant.
Yeah.
The quality of that work is like, I mean, how can you deny it, right? I mean, it's amazing. But
do you know what year he was born?
45.
45. Okay.
Yeah.
So he was like literally born when it ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's mainly, it's kind of, to distill it very clearly is difficult, and it's just me kind of questioning this, and it is partially a kind of.
Are you saying you feel manipulated by how much you like by the aesthetic of it? Is that what?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's not that It's not that I feel like I'm being manipulated or lied to by what I'm saying. It's mainly the kind of, it has to do a lot with the discourse around him, the overexposure, and those are kind of moot things when it comes to just appreciating the work.
Do you think he's overexposed?
Well,
To
I mean,
to the level of like Coons?
oh well, I mean, definitely. I mean,
You think so?
he's
Okay.
huge, but I mean, it depends on what we actually mean by overexposure. I mean, I like him a lot, so.
No, but what do you mean by overexposure?
Well, that's the thing. It's mainly the degree to which basically.
He's not bigger than Banksy.
Yeah, he is.
I'm
Yeah,
I'm saying like
Kiefer's one of the biggest, most successful living artists.
No,
in the
no, I'm
world.
saying he's not like mainstream like that though.
I guess not, but I mean, in
I would
terms
say-
of cash flow and things like that, he's of living artists. He's got to be.
No. I mean, I know. I'm aware that
yeah.
he's doing well for
He's,
himself. I mean,
he's doing
just
okay.
Look at the fucking site.
He's
what
making a living.
studio does he work in?
Right. Exactly. And
If you guys haven't seen the Exodus show, like go look at pictures and look at the scale of a human being standing next to one of those pieces.
very impressive.
Like one of the panels is maybe this wall.
yeah, right.
I mean, like not all the way to the top because this is pretty tall, but like the
and then there'll be 6 or 8 panels per painting.
that shit was crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So I loved it. I can't not love it. But it's basically all the kind of stuff around him, and even his kind of own sense of. It's basically has to do with the degree to which our current taste will endure in history. How this work will continue beyond him, and how there's already, because there's so much money around him, so much build-up, so much institutional approval. None of these are necessarily bad, but it's just a question of the apparent righteousness of his work, both in terms of what he's gotten out of life through it, but also in terms of its imagery and what it's telling us. Because his imagery is always about Nazism and blah, blah, blah.
Not necessarily directly. The fallout, like the aftermath, I would say.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, like he's not necessarily confronting Nazis directly. It's more of like it's a looming cloud.
Yes, yeah, and actually, that's a great way of saying it, because to me, it's wondering if he has not become a victim of his own success or his own sense of, for lack of a better word, righteousness in this endeavor.
Victim
because, of becoming, for lack of a better word or phrase, too big to fail, or again, like so much approval around him that what he's doing must be right, must be good. But are we so certain of what's actually happening in the work, in our subconsciousness when we see it or when we appreciate it? Whereas I think an earlier work by his that's really infamous, The Occupations, where he did the Sig Heil, photographs of him. He did that when he was very young, and he was very naive, obviously, and everything, but very brash and very ambitious also. And those are just photographs. They're very intriguing to me, and what's so interesting about that is the way that the kind of aesthetic virtue of those works is inextricably linked to the kind of question of morals.
Mm-hmm.
And also the fact that he's doing it.
Do you think he's moral about it, though? Do you think that there's morality in it? I mean, just like give me examples. I mean, obviously, Exodus is an impactful word, but
yeah.
But I never feel lectured.
No.
All right.
I would never say he's lecturing you.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that him putting himself out there when he was so young and had none of the approval. People forget that the last time that I think that he was interviewed and he was actually questioned hostilely was probably in the 80s. And there's a great documentary called Operation Sea Lion on YouTube, where even when he was very successful in the late 80s, I believe this documentary took place. But the interviewers, at least at a couple points, are kind of openly hostile to him, of what he's doing, of the gestures and art he's made. Because there was always the question early on in his career, like, is he a neo-Nazi? He's doing the Sig Heil, like, why is he doing this?
Yeah.
Blah, blah. And the point that I was trying to get at with those early works is that that was the question, I think, unconsciously he was grappling with the nature of aesthetics wrapped into morals, because that's essentially what, if you're playing with art and you're playing it in the if you're engaged in art but you're playing with the issue of Nazis, as he was in the early, like, then you understand the way you have to deal with the kind of aesthetic of the Nazis, the way Nazis dealt with art, or how they understood aesthetics, and that of course gets into the aesthetics even of humanity, of the kind of humanity they wanted, and the destroying of a certain aspect of humanity.
I get what you're saying. I'm following you so far. Yeah. The thing that I am not seeing the connect, or that hasn't been connected to me yet, is how that's moral. Like I think that
the moral part has to do with putting himself out there in the image of a Nazi. And
so then, but you could argue he's being amoral. Or
exactly.
Okay.
That's the question of the moral,
right.
And that's why people accused him, because they said, look, he's is he a Nazi?
Yeah, okay, but somehow.
And I think that kind of fairly courageous act of a young artist who has everything to prove but also nothing behind him.
Yeah.
Is kind of lacking in his work now, because he has everything behind him and nothing to prove.
Burden too, like
right, but Chris Burden didn't say, like, I'm tackling this issue of the question of moral in the aesthetic.
Yeah, but he did get shot in a fucking art class. I mean,
plenty of people have gotten shot in art class, but
no, I'm saying. I mean, I get what you're saying.
Well, Chris's work specifically had to do, at least my understanding, and I have not really thought about his work in depth, but I know a kind of classical, or the traditional mode of engaging his work is dealing in masculinity, And
yeah, which is we can see we can see very clearly in the lamppost piece and in the cars piece. I mean, come on.
Well, the early work specifically, the performances,
yeah. But I'm just saying that, like, it's like, I don't even know with institutions if I have the balls to do shit that I would have done as a kid. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I get what you're saying. I'm not pushing back.
It's a very fine line that I'm discussing in the writing, and to me, and that's why I start the work with saying, like, I like the paintings, because
you don't like the paintings.
No, I do. I love the paintings.
No, I'm
it would be amazing to even approach even a little bit of what he's been able to capture in that kind of space. I really do love.
see, I think, okay, I get what you're saying with the stuff, but yeah. I feel like you have to be someone that's very tied to a moral rectitude to sort of maybe interpret some of that through that lens specifically, because to me that's more about ambivalence than morality.
What is
just dressing up like and see Kyling, like that is
like a nihilism going on?
Not even that, but like how what is it? Okay, like if you're cosplaying as something that's evil, right? Like, why would you do that? It goes towards ritual magic and stuff like that, more of like the pomp and circumstance element of it, right? This is a historically pomp and circumstancey like thing, like so it is. I get why people would object to it, because you can't really I mean, they almost banned Roger Waters for doing a parody in like, I don't know if you heard about this. They canceled a show in Germany because he was wearing a Nazi uniform. And like, and then they let him do the show, and they uncanceled the show because the judge found that, like, yo, he's not pro-Nazi. Like, this is theater, and you're allowed within that space. Within the space of theater, you are allowed to take these things. I'm just surprised because I've never ever thought of his work as moralist. I thought of it as melancholy. I thought of it as sad and kind of self-reflective and all of that, but never like, even the books, the Lead book and the Lead Airplane, like that stuff doesn't read to me like.
No, because it's heavily abstracted, and I get at that in the work too. Is that the precision of the early imagery of just him in this garb doing this gesture and the symbolism of that was important.
Was he like? It's also like a there's like a free speech element to it, right? Because it's like there is a faction of people that think that like, yeah, it makes sense that you ban all Nazi paraphernalia in a
Sure.
place where Nazism was crazy, but like that is still a form of censorship, a form of control, which is like it's paradoxical in that sense.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, Kiefer's talked about that, how his early childhood, they wouldn't really discuss it. And a lot of it was that this kind of cultural amnesia and him, confronting that. And that's what I'm saying. And you got it at earlier where there are aesthetics of Nazi culture that we actually do appreciate even today. Hugo Boss, Mercedes. There are beautiful things that came out of this horrible entity, but that's kind of.
I wouldn't go and say that.
Okay, maybe that's going pretty far.
Beautiful
But
things.
there are intriguing things or things that kind of like, ooh, that's a nice jacket.
No, I mean, but look, but it is.
But that's what I was getting at with the way little aesthetic niceties that the door to the moral or the immoral is the kind of at the heart of the matter that I'm getting at. And you're right that Kiefer doesn't preach really, or he there's not a lot of
it's almost like
overt moralizing, but he actually does do that. Like even in the interview he gave about Exodus, there seems to me again like the kind of just ready-made righteousness in his work and in what people expect, where it's called Exodus. The theme of the show really is about global migration, so it's very current and timely, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that that there's a little bit too much certainty around the fact that it must be good. He must be saying the right thing, or he must have the right opinion.
What do you think he's saying in that show?
Well,
this is interesting.
Yeah.
I actually didn't even read any of the stuff about the show. So what is his take on the show?
Well, I don't really know.
I'm not saying that I'm not saying that there is no more moralizing in the work. I'm just surprised to hear someone say that that when they see the work, they're confronted with that question. Personally.
No, I think that,
or that you are having this reaction. That's just surprising to me. But I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. Yeah. Go ahead.
To me, that is the crux of the issue with the early occupations. And then as his work developed, as he basically became more and more of an abstract artist, or the imagery in his work abstracted and he became more successful, that was more on the back burner, because that problem had essentially been solved by everything behind him. So
you think he stopped talking about it because of his success? He stopped talking about the moralizing?
There's never a stop talking about it. I don't know if he's ever talked necessarily about morals. He doesn't seem to talk about that. He talks about the Kabbalah and things like that.
Yeah, because he's cool as shit.
Yeah. I would just...
Because he's rich and he's got time to read.
Yeah. It's...
I don't disagree with you. I'm just... this is just a really interesting take, and I've been wanting to dig it deeper into it. I don't think that you're wrong. There probably is some moralizing. I'm just... what is surprising to me is your I mean it's you're ambivalent towards him a little bit.
No,
because of this, I feel. Or no? Okay, sorry.
Maybe there's a tinge of doubt. I would say I would characterize it that way, because again, I've always been a fan.
So then let's take it to the logical conclusion of what you're talking about and say like what does he say specifically that has so much certainty that you think could be wrong? Because that's an interesting question, right? Like I'm with you. I am not a moralist personally myself. I'm more of an absurdist, where it's like I'm not you asked me, you said nihilism, but more absurd and more Dada than like fucking
Yeah.
black pill.
I don't think it's good ever to be like a
certain.
moralist or yeah. I think that, and the way I have phrased in the writing is that the whole point. Again, I feel like there's been some twisting going on here. I'm not saying that
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean
he-
to. If I'm paraphrasing wrong, I apologize.
it's the question, the moral question, the moral ambiguity that was key, and now it's the moral certainty that's put to out of play because you're certain. Why do you need to talk about it?
But what is he certain about?
It's not that he's certain. It's that we're certain. We're certain that he's a
that
good
Nazis were
artist.
bad?
That he's a good artist. Yes. That he. Now you're making me look weird.
I'm fucking with you.
We're certain that he's a great artist, a good artist, a great artist, and also we're certain that the politics or whatever else, or the morals or whatever's around his work must be on the right side, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And
You just want to see
the
a
whole
little
point,
bit more consideration.
the whole point of that early work was the question of not the right side, but just of who we are and on what side we actually are on. Because there's a difference between what we say and what we do, and that's a big issue with the text itself that I'm writing. Is a lot of it is just around the discourse, even what he said, and that's not really what the art is. The art is what the art is, and the degree to which those words adhere to a work or not is an interesting question, and the degree to which, if those words are dislodged from an artwork, is the artwork the same? Well, of course, it's not the same. But it's the question of, is it art without the words? Because some art is only words, quite literally.
No.
So that's an interesting question and something I'm trying to grapple with. And it's hard to pin down, and it is sort of in my own head even one of, maybe I'm just thinking too hard about this, or maybe I'm just trying to come up with a reason not to like him or something.
Well, to be fair, and I've just been trying to pick into and get an understanding of what you're saying. But to be fair, I don't think Exodus is his best work. It's amazing and it's impressive. So I'm not against the notion, but I think that I ascribe that more towards I expect to only have one thing that fucking nails it, in my life, and then everything else is just kind of I like it, but that's the piece, for me the lead books are really interesting. I think that stuff is more. So I understand with relating to someone's work from an earlier period, right, where their concerns were different. Yeah. So I'm not saying I am with you. I don't like certainty, so I don't have any certainty in this conversation. I just kind of wanted to get to the bottom of what you're saying, because it's more than anything, it's surprising to me, because I get it. It is. I always felt it was heavy, and I guess it's an interesting question of whether you can do heaviness like that and not have some morality. I don't think you're wrong. Yeah. It's maybe not overt, but it's they're not. He could also just be painting the good times of the Nazi party, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'll put it to you this way: one of my favorite, and actually one of my big influences right now in the work that I'm doing, is this guy Antonio Sant'Elia. He's a futurist from the Italian period.
Oh,
he's a fucking fascist. He died before he even got to fight in the war.
Yeah, the futurists, they did like war, didn't they?
The futurists were fucking insane. There's so many parallels to how they see the world to how we see the world now that we have this crazy technology that's gonna, solve all of humanity's problems, and it's in this really Orwellian kind of changing the definition of words kind of way that we're headed towards. But I totally have an appreciation for him as an artist and as a really brilliant, I grew up in neighborhoods that were inspired. I grew in Italy, the suburbs aren't like suburbs out here where you just have houses with yards or triplexes or single family homes or duplexes. You have apartment buildings in the suburbs, and they're all very there was a place called Fonte Meravigliosa, which is a marvelous fountain translated, and it's a living. The whole second, it has a whole walkway up top with all the building for the residential stuff, and then just like the town square down, and so there were all these very. It's kind of like all the malls that you see now out here. I forget which one it is, but there's a bunch of outdoorsy malls here that like are trying to redefine mall so that it's not like the 80s vibe, right?
Like the Citadel?
Yeah, Citadel and shit like that. Yeah, well, Citadel's that's a little bit cheaper, like Lauren, right?
Yeah, it's an outlet.
Yeah, I'm talking more like not even the Beverly Center, or not the Beverly Center.
I think I know what you're talking about.
It's just it's a new thing.
Yeah.
But like that's been around since like, you know, ages. Like the idea of residential on top of building, like residential on top of commercial.
Yeah.
Is like a huge thing over there. So anyway, so it's all this stuff that like people don't understand how much fascism is involved. Like Roma has two teams. One is Roma and one is Lazio. Lazio is the region, and Roma they play in the same stadium. Lazio was founded by fascists, you know, and it's really crazy because like Italian fascism is so incompetent by comparison to like everything else. There's even people that argue that Franco and Hitler were like not fascist because they were so much more violent they killed so many more of their own people. Like the fascists weren't fucking murdering their own citizens at the same rate. They were ultra nationalists that wanted to have their own empire like the Brits did. And then they fucked up and they needed the Germans to bail them out. Right. And it's like, and that's not excusing fascism, but what we call fascism is actually Nazism, you know, and like really, really dark shit, Pinochet shit, you know, Franco shit. Like Mussolini was like just a fucking thug. That was an idiot, you know, like, and really all he wanted to do was have the Roman Empire again, which is like the dumbest shit. But you see all of that stuff in like in the Futurists. They're really, that movement is oddly avant-garde and conceptual. You know, like they wrote like the Manifesto of Futurist Cooking. If you read that, it reads like performance art. It's you know, like it's people having dinner, and then you'll have like fans that will blow in smells in between meals, and like it's really like aristocratic and really crazy. Like, and I mean, so I also find, so the conversation about the morality of it is interesting to me from that standpoint, because like some of my favorite artists are shitty people. awful human beings, you know, but then they were also naive. It was that they had never had a country, and they were like they wanted to sever with the you know, all the history and like be modern. You know, so
that kind of gets back to, you know, separating the art from the artist, but also what we talked about earlier, where how an artwork kind of dictates itself to you after a certain point. And, you know, the degree this happens even for Kiefer. Like you said, what do you think Exodus is about? Well, I think it's about fairly obvious things. Again, I'll be honest, like I think painters, sculptors, we're not usually dealing with like extremely complex ideas. It's usually pretty pointed. And Kiefer's got his lexicon of imagery and material processes, and he kind of just does it. And then it's like, I'll put a satellite dish on this one. I'll put a submarine on that one. Boom. You know, you got a show. So, and you call it Exodus, and you put a bike on it, and you know, like I'm not trying to.
No, that bike was pretty. It
was cool.
It was cool, but it's also heavy-handed. I get what you're saying.
I'm not trying to discount him, but I'm saying like after a while,
it's
like
dramatic as fuck.
It's very dramatic the way it was lit and everything. And after a while, an artist will kind of have, again, their lexicon of imagery, their style, and it's just kind of a piecing it together show by show. And it's like what works, what doesn't. You know, should I put this motif in or not? You know. So when you say like, what does it mean? Well, it means what he's always meant, you know. Nothing new, really.
No, that's actually a fair criticism.
I'm not even criticizing, because what he's meant, I like a lot. It's just if you're asking me precisely like whether the politics around it, well, more precisely, it's just obviously liberal. Although no, politically he's probably wrong. I don't know. Actually, that was something interesting he said when they did the interview, him and Michael Govan at the Marciano Foundation. I think he talked at a certain point about identity politics, but he talked about it from a European perspective, specifically a German perspective, which was very interesting because when we say that in America, we have a very precise idea of what we're talking about. But he came from it from an identitarian position of how he was anti-identity politics and that he didn't like the idea that the Germans want to be German and they want to refuse migrants or refugees. So he came from it from the European perspective, which is different from just the American.
Well,
one.
they had a bunch of Turkish people come and like rebuild the country and didn't give them citizenship for the longest time. I don't know. I think
a lot of stuff is going on.
Yeah, no. So it's like it's
And it makes sense that he, who has been so anti-Nazi and had this on his mind for so long, of course he would be anti-identitarian and want to be pro.
Are you pro-identitarian?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I'm just saying, like, the politics are at least from what he's saying, are very pointed and obvious and clear. But what I would say again is that what is the art saying?
Yeah.
I would say that it's much harder to get at, and it might not line up perfectly with what he's saying.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I totally understand that, and like the point you make of him being a liberal, it's almost.
Well, we all are, aren't we?
No, I'm to the left of you guys. You guys are right wing to me, but I mean that's fair enough. Like I'm friends with right wingers. Like I'm from Florida. I don't discount anyone based on their politics, especially.
I'm from Texas.
Yeah, you know, like there are some good people, and you can agree on how to treat each other without having that be the forefront. In fact, I almost like. It's more fun to argue with a right winger than a liberal these days because liberals are taking things a little seriously in terms of Trump breaking their brain. But and they're like, we have to save democracy. We can't let this guy get voted in. I'm like, you're describing democracy. Yeah. Like if he gets voted in, anyway, I'm not a Trump supporter. I fucking hate him. He did horrible, like he did the worst shit to Cuba. We were on a path to have Cuba have open borders, and then he closed it down, and then Biden came in and was like, I like it. We're gonna keep it like this. And so I can't travel to the country. But anyway, the point.
And you can't even travel there?
I can't, not from here. I mean, I have to go through Mexico.
Oh, right.
But like literally my sister just went and there's nobody there. Like anybody that's between 18 and 40 has left.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm not, and then same shit as he did the same shit to Venezuela. So I'm not like I want to be clear. Trump is a piece of shit. I'm not, but anyway, this will probably be cut out.
Oh, okay. Oh, you edit these? Okay.
I mean, not really, like, but just whenever politics like this comes up, it's just so triggering to people.
Yeah, no, that's all good.
But,
cut out whatever you want.
No, but I mean, this is a really fascinating conversation, and I think I really think that you made me think about Kiefer. I don't really try to consider the artist's politics most of the time.
No,
because most of the time I don't agree with most people in the world about politics because I have a very specific worldview. I come from refugee parents. I lived. My dad worked for neoliberalism for most of my life at the UN, so I have a very different perspective on what neoliberalism has done to Africa because that's who he worked with specifically. That was. Like you were talking about identitarian stuff. The race reductionism is a real thing here. Like there's no nuance to the way that people talk about it. It's either you're, true. And it makes sense why, because of the original sin of slavery. But the racial tensions are different elsewhere. And Europe's global south is Africa. Right. That's the Mexico of Africa. That's where the migrants come from. They're not coming from Mexico in the same numbers as they're coming here. Yeah. So that all of that stuff is really interesting. I agree. I think that if I include what you point out about his politics into what I think about his work, I would probably have a very hard time with him. I would. If I went and listened to what his politics are, just because of the generational thing.
Sure. Yeah.
and all of that.
Well, you said something interesting where your opinion of the occupations was more ambivalent. You said, or that you saw it more as an ambivalent gesture.
Which one?
The when he was doing the Sig Heil.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And that was interesting because that's kind of like a punk rock thing. Then, I've never thought of it that way. I guess I never thought of it that way because usually it's never packaged that way. But that actually is kind of intriguing.
It's like Joey Ramone wearing a fucking swastika.
It's a little different because it was a German in Germany doing this.
And a Jew in a punk band?
It's still a little different, I say. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely not the same thing, but...
it's different when the fucking guy from the Sex Pistols does it. That guy's a douchebag. Isn't there one of them... Didn't one of the guys kill...
It's also like the nature of the medium. The medium might dictate the messaging there, where he's a punk rocker, right? So
yeah.
Whereas Kiefer was an artist, and artists, I think only like the idea of ambivalence or like thumbing your nose or at the high-low kind of play is it. Well, I don't know. I'm getting muddled now. Nah, it's just interesting that you brought that up because it's usually that would be like if an American did it, I could see that kind of.
That dude would get canceled.
Well, no, back then though.
Oh yeah.
I could see how that might be the reaction now as just provocative and blah blah blah, and it was certainly provocative even then. But I think that there would. Even Kiefer, I would think, would say this, that there seems to be more sincerity behind the gesture. It's not just provocative for provocative's sake.
Oh, no, yeah. I definitely don't think it... I mean, it's... The fucking weight of it is too heavy. You can't just... Like, that's not something... A German in Germany doing that is just not something that you can take lightly, you know, in any context, because they could go to fucking jail. Like, straight up. This is really interesting. I wish we could go on and on. I don't want to take your time, too much of your time, because we've been going for like an hour and 17 minutes. Anything that we can promote for you, man. This was really interesting. Like not everybody. I like this because not everybody that I have on the show has such a rigorous. In fact, you're gonna probably be one of the people that people are like, I don't know what to talk about because some people come in with really good topics, and I'm like, I'm an idiot, guys. You can talk to me about anything. Yeah. But this I do enjoy these rigorous, like, art specific conversations. Sometimes people come and talk about like other things, which are fine too, because we always get down to the core of what makes you an artist that way. But I like it when somebody has a lot of theory, and sometimes people will come on and they'll have really dense topics that are interesting but not art related. So I really like that we were able to talk like just straight art for like this is the most art heavy episode that I've had in a long time. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for caring about these things, and I'm sorry for joking about the Nazis being right.
Nah, it's all good. It's one of those
too fucking funny.
Yeah, it's one of those things where once you start talking about it, people are always like, what's he actually getting at?
No. I didn't think that you were, but it was just such a funny setup where it's like, how is he so sure he's right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So you people can find your Instagram permanent storage. It's at.
On Instagram, permanent storage projects and underscore in between all the words.
Okay, and then your personal is at Cameron Cummings?
No, it's at The Body Photographic.
Okay, and but if you see Cameron Diaz with jizz in her hair, you're in the right place.
Yeah, it's Cameron Cummings.
Yeah.
Someone recently asked me why I had Cameron Diaz. That's the first time anyone. I was like, Don't you know? Don't you get it?
You don't know that there's something about Mary?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Cool, man. And then, we'll be back next week with another guest with another topic that may or may not be art related. Any website for you?
Yeah, CameronCumming.com.
Oh, you noticed that's the end. That's like literally the sign off. That wasn't directed at you. The sign off is always that may or may not be art related. That's why I was so excited.
Cool.
Yeah. So this one was very much art related. Sometimes I'll even assess, how much art content there was in the art conversation. All right, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for
And-
coming over and setting all this stuff up. And
Yeah,
taking
no-
your time.
Oh, dude, I mean, I'd be doing it if you didn't invite me. Just break in here. All right, cool. And we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much.